The challenge is simple. Start from 0-1 and make it all the way to the end of 7-4. In other words, beat the whole game. But of course, there's a catch. You see, there's this rather silly game mode in Ultrakill, where you act like Crash Bandicoot, running away from enemies, spinning them into oblivion, and even doing a little victory dance to celebrate. It's called Clash Mode. It's featured as the gameplay style in the secret level of the Greed Layer. But what you might not know is that you can take that mode and play the rest of the game in that style, which is what we'll be doing. It's kind of a hard mode because you get one shot by everything, but it's not too bad because everything also gets one shot by you. And when I say everything, I really do mean everything.
You are a worthless bitch-ass machine.
Yeah, this shit is whack, yo.
Now, it might seem easy enough to get from the beginning of the game to the end of the game, but what makes this so hard is the fact that we are going to do it without dying a single time. Yeah, that's gonna be a little rough with how stacked some of the levels are, but there is one thing you get that the enemies don't have access to.
What have I got?
Sorry, I mean invincibility. Yeah, thankfully this mode has at least one intentional saving grace. Basically, it works in 3 stages. If you take damage in the first 2 stages, those being the blue and the red, you just lose a stage of invincibility instead of dying. But if you're good enough to stack up 3 power-ups and get to the purple stage, then you can negate any and all damage for the next 20 seconds, which is absolutely huge, especially when you're playing on Brutal like I am. The purple stage can kind of be uncontrollable at times because every time you get hit, you get bounced up into the air a little bit. But hey, it's better than dying. At least you're not dying, alright?
Oh, hello.
Oh, and unlike the actual Clash Mode level, you can actually pick up secrets that will give you more than one stage of invincibility, sometimes even instant purple stage. And whoever decided that that's how it's gonna work is a godsend, dude. Like, I love you. But other than that, there's not really much more to tell you about the basics of the mode. There are a few more niche mechanics, but it'd be better if I explain them as they come up instead of yapping for the next 5 minutes. That said, it's time to get into the good stuff. I don't know why, and maybe it's just because I'm a dumbass, but there is always something that goes wrong with my first stream in a series like this. And this time, it was a problem of poor quality. Specifically, the bitrate sucked. But quite contrastively, the actual, progress that I make on this day is actually pretty good, with me, surprisingly, making it all the way to Wrath. The only problem now is if I don't have any more secrets left, so if I get hit, I'm dead. One fart and I'm dead. Dude, they jumped through the wall. Yeah, that one was rough. Died to a fucking this piece of shit. I died to this thing. And you know, with this being the first day and all, the confidence wasn't really there yet. Might actually be impossible in later levels. It's not impossible. It is sad, like my current rank says, but it is possible. I've done it. I got to violence one time. Now, I don't know what the hell happened with day 1 for me to get that far, but during the next couple of days, I was not as fortunate. On day 2, nothing really happened except for me figuring out that 4-3 is a potential choking point. Yeah. And on day 3, I didn't make any PB progress either, but I did happen to accidentally stumble across something that would make Wrath quite a bit easier. Huh? What did I just do there? I need to do that again. Okay. What did I do? Okay, literally all I did was keep sliding into that wall. Okay, so... It's as easy as that, bro! Come on, if I could get a dive. There we go. Okay, and then we clip out of bounds. Come on! There we go. And then... Okay, right here is where there's a really important mechanic that you've probably never seen before, so I'm going to explain how it works. It's the thing that allowed me to get so much height and the thing that made this strategy work in the first place. It's called a ramp boost. Basically what it consists of is using a ramp with a lot of speed into a slide. And once you actually hit the ramp, you want to release that slide. Now you probably noticed just now that the actual slide part of it is incredibly short. Or maybe you didn't even notice that I slid at all because there was no animation for it, it was so short. And that's because you only have to tap the slide key once you run into the ramp. You don't have to hold it down. You can also do this from a standstill, but it works infinitely better when you have momentum going into it. Like, look how high I'm going right now. Holy shit. Get huge height from that. Then we get up here. And then we just let this room load in. But we can come in through this checkpoint. Oh wait, I'm not gonna have the secret then. We can checkpoint there. Oh. Okay, dope. I can just skip those guys. So yeah, I found a skip in 5.1 that basically just allows me to skip the entire level. And apparently it's really easy to clip out of bounds in Clash mode in like every single level, but that's not really fun. So I only did it in this one specific level because it's just such a hard level, and the fact that I can do this just makes my life so much easier. No shade to this runner or this run, by the way. I usually just don't like clipping out of bounds. I also found this really annoying bug that keeps you from breaking idols when you're invincible. Wait, I can't break idols with invincibility, I forget. That's a bug. I'm not saying the bug is a good thing, I'm just saying it's good that I found it so that I know that that's a thing and I can avoid it in the future. But anyway, on day 4, I started keeping track of my personal best on stream so that people could see it and not have to ask. But I also got a new PB, finally. That's a new PB, ladies and gentlemen! And you know, I probably would have gone further too if it weren't for the chat literally having psychic power. I curse you with fuck your run, die in game now. No! Such a terrible curse. I hate you. I hate you so much. You actually cursed me. Hey, that's a new PB though. Day 5 was the first time I reached violence in an actual run, which was pretty hype. First ever violence? Holy shit! But I ended up dying very, very early on in 7.1, so that made me very sad, and I could not get back there for the rest of the day. Day 6 was yet another day without PBs, but I made a really important discovery about a very pesky bug that I had pretty much lost multiple runs to at that point. How did I immediately get fucked there? What? I don't understand. I lost it immediately. Watch, I'm gonna lose the... Okay. Yeah. It's pretty annoying. And so I decided to investigate because I was getting really tired of it. Everything seems fine so far. I think I understand. Okay, so we're on 0-4. I haven't died yet. I'm going to play the sandbox. I'm gonna test my theory. I think what happens is the flashing still registers as me having a tear. So when the flashing stops is when the purple skull went away. I think that's what happened. Let's see. So this last 20 seconds, when this goes away, I'm gonna grab this while I'm flashing. My guess is that it's gonna go away as soon as I should stop flashing. No. Well, I don't fucking know. I specifically, I got hit by something. Was it because I got hit the moment that the flashing stopped? I don't... Okay, what I said there was kind of right, but not really. So I'm going to explain to you what actually happened. So somewhere in the game's code, there likely exists a Boolean variable that deals with the player's invincibility state. For those of you who don't know what that means, let's just call this variable a checkbox. My guess as to what causes this illusory state of invincibility has to do with how the game manages the state of this checkbox. When you put on the purple skull in Clash mode, the game sends a signal to change the state of the checkbox to true, meaning the player is to now be considered invincible in the eyes of the game's operations. So anything that would normally do damage no longer can, at least for the next 20 seconds. Once those 20 seconds are up, you lose the purple skull, and your player model begins to flash. This flashing period is what ends up causing the bug. See, normally the player model will flash for about 3 seconds, and once it stops, the game will send one final signal to the checkbox to change its state back to false, as it should. However, picking up additional power-ups during the flashing period, like I did, does not prevent that 3-second timer from finishing, meaning that even if you do reinstate your invincibility by obtaining another power-up, the game will still send that final signal that takes away your invincibility.
What the hell is even that?
That's why, when I took damage from this schism right here, I lost the purple skull, because the game didn't actually see me as invincible, even though, to me, I clearly was. Okay, I think I just need to make sure that I don't pick up the next one until I am done flashing. Day 7 was... oh my god, day 7. Going into this day with a PB of 7-1, I didn't have much left to accomplish, but I made just about as much of a PB as you can make without actually winning the challenge. I literally got to the final room of 7-4 and died. No! Fuck, man. Like, if I cleared that room of enemies, it was over. I would have won. But unfortunately, I fell victim to an unlikely circumstance. I was literally this close. Yeah, if it hadn't been for that perfectly placed landmine, I would have done it. And I never would have had to suffer through what was probably the worst feeling ever in day 8. God damn it, I got the bug again. Why? I didn't get hit by anything, bro. You're trolling. Absolutely throwing. It's fine. Don't you fucking dare. Oh! I got robbed. I actually got robbed. The game fucking... Should I checkpoint since the game robbed me? You know, I'm taking that run right now. I'm getting really, really annoyed. There's one more gutter tank somewhere. Okay, this is a much better run. Nice. Alright, this is what it could have been. Is this a real run? Yeah, technically it is. Like, I shouldn't have died when I died in 7-3 last time because of a bug. I died to a really stupid bug. The game literally just said, oh, you're gonna take damage now. It just doesn't feel as good. It just doesn't. Like, I beat it, but it didn't really feel like it. Because I knew I could go all the way through the game from beginning to end without dying or checkpointing or whatever. That was literally the point of the challenge. And if I took this quote-unquote win, then I wouldn't really have completed it. To be honest, I kind of knew I would feel like that after taking the checkpoint, but I did it anyway just to feel like I was getting somewhere. But day 8 was not the last day. It may have been the last day I was live, but it wasn't the last day. Okay, how should I do this? How should I... You see, on day 9, there's not a whole lot of me talking, and by not a whole lot of, I really mean none at all. There's a good reason for that, though, and I think English from A to Z here explains it pretty darn well.
Being locked in means having absolute focus, drive, or determination to achieve a singular goal or objective. In terms of you want to beat a record or you want to win the game, you're not distracted by anything else besides the task at hand, and you have 100% or your full attention focused on that goal or objective.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I think it's pretty safe to say that this motherfucker is particularly locked in. Bro didn't say a single audible word throughout this entire 53.5-minute recording. In all seriousness, though, that's the whole reason I didn't stream this run, because while it's fun having an audience and seeing people react with you, this stupid thing I committed myself to was actually the most challenging thing I've ever done. And for something like that, I needed absolute focus. Now obviously I'd love to show you every single second of this 53.5-minute clip, but if I do that, we'll have another one of these. So instead, I'm just going to trim it down a bit. Now if you do want to see the whole thing, there is a link to that in the description of this video. But on we go. So probably unsurprisingly, the Prelude is where I spent the most amount of time in total in this challenge. Oftentimes I would get frustrated that I wasn't making any progress, and I would try to go as quickly as possible through it, and that would lead me to stupid deaths, most of the time in the first or second level. That fact aside though, these levels really aren't that hard. Each level did kind of have its own frustrating part. Like in the first level, it's this room that I'm in right now with the strays, just because it took so long to get through it safely. In the second level, it was the very last room, and it being at the end is specifically why it sucked, because if I ever lost any of my invincibility skulls before it, it would become a lot harder. The third level is really easy. You can skip like 99% of it, so there's not much danger there. But the fourth level was kind of the make or break point of the Prelude. It's difficult because I always try to have at least one stage of invincibility, but there's only one secret in the first room, and if you lose that, it becomes a game of walking on eggshells, pretty much. But to top it off, the fifth level is literally just, you cannot die unless you just suck. Like, the Cerberus literally don't even get a chance to breathe. They're just instantly dead. Limbo is where I really started planning things out. There were a lot more enemies throughout the levels, so naturally I needed to be careful about my positioning, but also about when and where I picked up secrets. And the one good thing about this challenge is that if you didn't know where the secrets were before it, you're definitely going to after, because let me tell you, the strategy for beating every single level from this point on is going to revolve almost completely around timing when I pick up the secrets. Starting with 1-1. The strat here was to basically just blast through every single enemy with the purple skull. I did this by first grabbing this one secret atop the tower towards the beginning, then second, grabbing the red secret behind the waterfall here, and once that purple skull ran out, I could just grab this secret in the corner of the penultimate room and finish the level. Pretty simple. 1-2, on the other hand, was not so easy. For the first half of the level, you didn't have access to any secrets, at least in Clash mode. There is this one secret here in this second room, but after a lot of testing, I figured out that once you fall down here, there's actually no way to get back up. It's deceivingly close, but trust me, I tried many, many times. There's also this one, but it has pretty much the same problem. But you could actually get it if you can manage to jump on top of a filth without dying, but that's kind of risky, so it's not too practical. Because of this, the first secret that you can actually get isn't until after you get the blue skull key to open this door. So I had to play very carefully, baiting enemies in and hiding out of sight until I could get there. After grabbing that first secret though, the pressure was basically gone. All that was left to do after that was grab this red secret underneath the Cerberus, and then the mighty finger of death would take care of the rest. Once again, the third level of the layer wasn't that hard. That may seem surprising at first, considering just how many enemies are in 1-3, but when you also think about the fact that I'm not trying to P-rank any of these levels, it doesn't seem so bad. All I had to do was do a ramp boost into this secret and then yoink the blue skull before jetting past the Maurice and allowing the hideous mass to live for exactly 0.2 seconds. And ditto for V2, except this dude didn't even get to hit the ground.
Holy shit!
Activating Aussie mode.
Woo! Who's ready for the last layer, eh? How about you? Over there with the weird, the skinny one. What the fuck is he doing? Cut! Sorry, you'll have to excuse that guy. He's a bit silly. Anyway, the last layer was a bit of a mixed bag. 2 of the levels were incredibly easy, and the other 2 were incredibly hard. Thankfully, the 2 hard ones were in the middle though, so I could start with and end on an easy level. 2-1 was mostly easy thanks to its short length and open pathways. The only considerably difficult part was the first tower, since it had a couple of drones, and in brutal mode, well, they kinda suck. But I always grabbed this secret at the beginning to ensure that I had just a little bit of insurance against them. After that, the bounce pads below the bridge and these very strangely shaped poles at the entrance of the second tower allowed me to skip straight to the end of the level. Easy enough. 2-2, on the other hand, did not have such luxuries. Its breaker box system also made for an uncomfortable playstyle, to say the least. Since the secrets were pretty spaced out and enemies would spawn when I broke the boxes, I had to plan most, if not all, of my movements in this level, so as to not get caught by any stray bullets. This wasn't the only level that demanded this playstyle either, because the further the run got, the more enemies there would be, and in clash mode even the weakest of foes demand an immense amount of respect. The plan for 2-2 was as follows. Head straight to the right and reach this roof to bait the 3 initial soldiers. After killing them, I could safely reach the secret in this window over here, which I did, and then headed to the first box. After breaking it, I baited the first 2 spawned soldiers by sitting in this corner, but this also allowed the Cerberus to close in, giving me 3 safe and easy kills. Next, the other 2 rooftop soldiers were fair game. Usually I would move with more precision and kill them without taking any hits, but I choked pretty bad in this run. After all that was the second box. It spawned 4 enemies, 2 street cleaners and 2 soldiers. Luckily, the soldiers rolled straight into me after spawning, and the cleaners followed close behind. Once they were dead, I headed to the third and final box, which would spawn a malicious face and many more soldiers. Thankfully, the exit door would open as soon as the box was broken, meaning I didn't have to clear the entire room of enemies, so I just broke the box and got the hell out of there. There were always a couple of soldiers that would end up following me, but I just used the wall bait strat in the next room to kill them safely. After that, the middle section was up next. This part was a little problematic because I had lost my secret and there was a Maurice that was about to spawn. But with precisely timed dash spamming, I could kill it without getting hit. And from there I just needed to get up the stairs as quickly as possible, avoiding every single enemy I could. Once I got to the rail cannon, it was pretty much just a race for purple invincibility. To get it, I just baited these guys, grabbed a couple of secrets around the room, and then used the purple skull to break the boxes and escape unharmed. If you're able to pull those strats off with precision, this level isn't so bad. And 2-3 was more or less the same way, although it was a bit harder. My initial plan for this level was to cut it short and take the secret exit, but to do that you have to break 3 hidden boxes, one of which sits in a loft all the way up in the corner of this room. But there doesn't seem to be any way of reaching it, so I had to find a normal route. I started by grabbing the secret next to the first accessible breaker box, then headed to the waterfall room. In there I could ramp boost up to this second secret and then immediately drop back down to get a third for purple invince. When I was done there, I tried to clear out the initial area, but I proceeded to get juggled for the entire remaining duration of my purple skull, so I gave up and moved on. That big room I mentioned earlier was next, and it required a lot of careful positioning because once you crossed the spawn trigger, it would become overrun with problematic enemies. The soldiers were by far the most threatening, so I needed to get rid of them first. Luckily though, most of them spawned in a straight line up here, so I could use this guy's projectile corpse to kill the other two. To get that triple kill on the soldiers, I needed to stand somewhere over here. But this was past that enemy trigger that I mentioned earlier, so I would have to find a way to get up there other than the ramp in the back. And that's where this lovely little lamppost comes in. I used it to get up there and minimize the time it took for me to get to that spot after crossing the trigger, and this proved to work pretty well. This spot also worked for all the other non-drone enemies, because they had no other option than to use the ramp, which allowed me to consistently wallbait them. The second wave of enemies was kind enough to introduce drones though, so yippee! Some of the drones had really weird behavior and they would just float into me, but it made for easy kills, so I'm not going to complain. Most of the drones tended not to do that though, so I had to deal with them face to face. Finally was the last room. It was a bit tough, but I could sort of cheese it by going back into the key room and closing the door to single out or bait in enemies, especially the Mind Flayer. That's a 200 IQ play right there. And of course, once the room was cleared, I was done. Which brings us to 2-4. Yeah, I literally never died here. Not a single time in any of my runs. It was really, really easy.
Can't be that easy.
Oh, it's that easy. So let's move on. Though it was the shortest layer in Act 1, and also probably out of the entire run, Gluttony was one of the hardest. It was the first real pressure point of every attempt, and the difficulty came almost entirely from 3-1 alone, between just 2 rooms. The first one was technically more of a hallway, but, you know, a Marie spawns in there, so I'm considering it a room. And the other one was the room right after that hallway. The problem with these rooms is that they were well before any acquirable secrets, so I had to be perfect. In every room that is seemingly impossible, like this one, I look for a place to hide. This room didn't really have any, except for this one corner. The tendon-like pillar here allowed me to just barely break line of sight with the Mind Flayer, most importantly, and all the other enemies. So the Mind Flayer would have to teleport right on top of me, making an easy kill, and I could just sit behind the pillar to bait the rest of the enemies. It sounds easy, but seriously, one misposition and you're dead. Quite a few of my runs ended that way. But if I could pull it off, the rest of the level was basically non-existent. It was over. The Cerberus was the last thing in the room, and it telegraphs the fuck out of its arrival, so I could just sit in place until it was actually killable, and then I could do the same with the rest of them in the other room. But I did always grab this one's secret under the bridge, just to be safe. And then of course, once I was done with them, I just took the secret exit in the next room, as any sane person would. Since that secret exit takes you to P1, I would always do it just for fun. I just thought it was quite funny how fast I could kill 2 of the hardest bosses in the game. And then, of course, there was 3-2. In every attempt, this was generally where I started to feel like the run had a chance. There was no way I was going to die to Gabriel, and since he was the only enemy in the level, there was nothing else stopping me from getting to Greed, so it was always a nice boost to my morale. If I were to somehow die in this level, it would be because I missed a jump during the parkour leading up to Gabriel's chamber, but even that, I never did. Just because Greed was exciting to reach, though, doesn't mean that it was all smooth sailing. At least for the levels that weren't the first 2. The elevator's exterior modeling in these first 2 levels included a ramp that allowed me to get so much height that in 4-1 I could literally just skip the entire level, and in 4-2 I could skip most of it. The only difficult part of 4-2 was managing to not give myself that stupid invincibility bug that I talked about earlier, because there were so many dual-wield power-ups in this level that it would actually be harder to die than to beat it. Seriously. 4-3 was where things became a bit shaky. It was the second and honestly most iconic pressure point of every attempt, because while it's no 7-4, there was always a very good chance that the run would die here. Alright, time to lock in. The first iffy part was the quad pillar room, where you have to ignite these fire pits and defeat the enemies that come with those ignitions. There was a dual wield power-up in the ceiling, which made it not so bad, but it often wouldn't last long enough to clear all 4 waves of enemies, especially because it was hard not to get juggled with so much going on. I also made it a priority to kill every single other enemy before the last room, anytime I got to this level, because if I ever lost red invince before the final door, I would have to go back through the level and get one of the earlier secrets, because having purple invince during the final fight is pretty much mandatory. And if you've ever been in that room, you would understand why. It's chaotic even in normal gameplay, but in Clash mode? There's so much happening at all times that it's genuinely difficult to keep track of everything coming at you. That's why I needed purple invince, because without it I would get killed pretty damn fast. Even just having the purple skull though wasn't enough. Because there were so many enemies in this room, with some not even appearing until later waves, I needed a route, and one that would allow me to kill most enemies before my 20 seconds of bliss were up. It took a bit of trial and error, but the final route was this. From the entrance door, I headed straight to the other side of the arena to take out this virtue, and I always tried to get these 2 street cleaners along the way. The virtue is important here because once it dies, the second wave of enemies spawns, including the next virtue. I used the knockback from the one I just killed to give myself an easier path back to the entrance. After both virtues were dead, I turned my attention to the Maurices since they were the most threatening, but I took out a few smaller enemies along the way. At this point, most of the real threats were gone, but unfortunately, so was my purple skull. This wasn't too big of a deal, I just needed to play very carefully around the remaining enemies, mostly by putting a wall between myself and them with this pillar in the middle. That's one of the things that made this room so hard though, the fact that I wouldn't be able to kill everything in 20 seconds or less. But enemies aside, I did still have one other thing to worry about. The chasms. Trust me, killing enemies this quick without falling off is not as easy as it looks. Just ask this past version of me. And that's how it goes usually. Of course, I still managed to beat the level here anyway, against all odds. So on to 4-4. This was another boss level, so you know what that means. Absolutely no secrets. On the surface, this level is just about as easy as 3-2, but there was a little bit more to it. V2 is a very agile enemy, so even though it could be one shot, it was still kind of a threat because of how fast it was. I needed to kill it pretty much instantly, and I did that by taking advantage of this one-time animation that plays the first time you enter the level. Once positioned, I could just skip the animation and attack immediately. I never experienced having to actually chase V2, but I would imagine it's horribly bad for my health. Oh, and since you one-shot everything you touch in this mode, the second phase of the fight never happens, because that one hit takes out both of V2's health bars. And side note, this applies to every boss with multiple phases. So that's nice. But the level still wasn't over because of the handful of enemies that appears when you pick up the Whiplash. Trust me, you do not want to die to these guys, it's the worst feeling ever. So just aim for the Schism like I did, and then wait for the Maurice to spawn and kill it before it can do anything. Don't die once like I did. Anyway, that's greed for ya. Wrath is a unique layer, because I'm pretty sure it's the first time these weird green checkpoint things show up. They only appear in Clash mode, and they're there because the parts of the level in between them are supposed to be impossible, and they let you skip those parts. But in 5.1, there's a secret within this first impossible area. This is how I know the ramp boost is an unintended mechanic, because this part of the level is actually very possible, but only if you know how ramp boosting works. Luckily for you, though, you're watching this video. I didn't actually need to cross this gap here, though, because this is where that crazy Out of Bounds clip was. Now, there is actually a legitimate way to beat 5-1, while staying in bounds, but I'll discuss that towards the end of the video. To perform the clip, all I needed to do was slide into the wall and release at just the right time. I figure this works because of some weird hitbox shenanigans, I don't know, but it's super useful. Once out of bounds, I always went over to this floating door, which looks like this without Fulbright. To get to the door from where I was, though, I needed to do a huge ramp boost. Coincidentally, there was a sharp incline right here, like literally just a few meters from where I clipped out. It's almost as if it was meant to be. A few spin dashes later and I made it through the door, sped past the enemies, and then took the secret exit. No, I didn't do the fishing level, which brings us to 5-2. This level is also very unique because like 70% of the time I spent in it was just surfing. Just chilling on the waves and shit.
Feeling my nuggets.
When I first started practicing this level, I really wanted to make use of the fact that you can surf, because it's something that not every player knows you can do, and I was almost certain it would let me skip a lot of the enemies. The route I came up with is pretty simple. Slide off the left side to the lighthouse island from the entrance, grab this secret, surf back to this island with the tall rock, and specifically right here to not spawn the enemies immediately, then walk up and go for the Maurice, finish the other two, and finally do a crazy ramp boost off that tall rock. Going up here skips all the enemies that spawn in the dock area, but it also lets me grab this secret before going into what is probably the only unavoidable part, the middle cabin segment. I would get 3 secrets for purple invints to make this easier, but the bug I mentioned earlier prevents me from breaking the idols after getting the purple skull. This, I have no idea why it happens. Just don't grab 3 secrets before breaking idols, I guess. The actual fighting is kinda tough, so I'll show you my route. The enemy spawn trigger is right about here, so I would always cross it slowly, then dash back towards the soldier next to the door I came in from. The one on the other side would usually just roll into me, so I'd kill it and then wall bait the remaining 2 soldiers. There isn't really a good way to deal with the Maurice. You're pretty much just going to have to brute force it. I took damage here, but it's easy not to if you're more precise with your dash timings. With the Cerberus and the Virtue, though, I always stood right here so the Virtue would aim there, and then I'd just dash forward into the remaining idol cage to wallbait the Cerberus. After I had taken care of the enemies in there, though, I could grab the blue skull key. To get it on the pedestal safely, I used this rock to ramp boost up, land on the pedestal, then checkpoint back to right after picking up the skull key. I know it's a bit cheesy, but I didn't have any invincibility, so what do you want from me? This works because when checkpointing, for some reason, skull keys stay either in your hand or on their pedestals, instead of going back to where they were pre-checkpoint. This meant I could just skip all those enemies and just go on this roof and do another insane ramp boost onto the ship. Of course, we can't forget about Florp. Yes, picking him up is required for this level, because look at him and tell me he shouldn't be. Anyway, the rest is pretty self-explanatory. You're probably going to want to take a breather for this next one, though, because it is undoubtedly going to cause some stress. "5-3 is an absolute monster of a level, and that's considering the fact that I skipped an entire third of it. It's another one of those split path levels where either skull key you get will let you through, but the easy route was the blue one. Ain't no way in hell I'm ever gonna choose the red side. It might just be one room, but that's kind of the problem. At least with the blue route, there was a very skillful way to overcome it. Oh, and did I mention that this is all without secrets? Yeah, now you can probably see why taking the red route is a terrible idea. It might be a nice test of skill by itself, but when you have to go through every other level in the game before it just to get an attempt, nah, it's stupid. It's just stupid. The first secret you can even get is behind this door, which opens once you've placed the blue skull here. There really is no way to protect yourself here. It's just one of them fuck it we've all moments. Know what I'm saying? Okay, enough pointless yapping. Let's talk about how to overcome the monster that is 5-3. To start the level, I had to deal with a couple street cleaners, a schism, and a few strays. This door right here was my best friend, because it allowed me to wallbait with almost no danger. Once the enemies had been spawned, I zipped right back through that door and waited for the street cleaners to run through. Sometimes they'll get stuck and not go through the door, but in that case you just need to restart the level because it's way too dangerous to go back and open it again. After they were dead though, I killed the schism waiting at the door and jumped against this wall to make the strays run away. This released them from their posts most of the time and allowed me to once again wallbait with the door. It was really easy to know when to go for them too because their arms would clip through the wall. Sometimes they'd get stuck up here like this guy, but with precise movement, you'll be fine. Next was the room where the Cerberus and Maurice spawn, but surprisingly it's skippable, so obviously that was the plan. Now this room, right here, this is where everything can go wrong. Secretless and fragile as ever, you're faced with a virtue, 2 sentries, 4 soldiers, and 2 schisms. Here's how I did it. The enemies spawn in waves, thankfully, so I took heavy advantage of that. Upon first entering the room, I would always position myself right where one of the 2 sentries would spawn, killing it immediately. There was no time to rest though because 2 soldiers will spawn on the side opposite of the sentry you kill. In brutal mode, soldiers can roll, and they will if they feel they're too far away from you, so I would always position myself in the middle of the room after killing the first sentry to bait them in. Once dead, I repeated that same process, only this time the remaining sentry had moved, so I aimed to take out the soldier closest to where it died, and then used a precisely timed dash to dodge the remaining soldier's bullets. After all that, you can kind of rest, because the final 2 schisms won't spawn until after the virtue is killed, but don't for too long, because the virtue will enrage, obviously. As for the 2 schisms that spawn, they will do so on each side of the room, one by the doors, and one by the fireplace. I would always take out whichever one was closer to me after killing the virtue, carefully dodge a barrage from the remaining one, and then take it out. With that, the hardest room was complete. Now I could grab the blue skull, get the secret here, and move to the second half of the level. Also, just to clarify, the Cerberus and Maurice just never spawn in if you leave that room fast enough the first time, so that's why they were inactive when I came back for the secret. Thank God for that, honestly. Moving on to the hallway, just stand in the middle and everything will come to you. The staircase after was a little sketchy, but just do your best to stay calm. Knowing exactly where the enemies spawn here helps quite a bit, and jumping before the soldiers spawn is a good idea because for some reason they just get catapulted off. It's kind of funny, but also really bad for your health. The next room is crazy, but luckily our beloved dual-wield power-up is here to save the day. This room is comparable in enemy count to 4-3's final room, but the differences here are compactness and the fact that you can't fall off the map. I didn't really have a route for this room, but I would always try to take out the big guys first, that being the sentries, virtues, Maurice, Mindflayer, Cerberus, you name it. Of course, I would also take out any smaller enemies along the way. Most of the time, I would run out of purple invints before clearing the room, but that was usually when most of the enemies were dead, and it was safe to hide behind walls and bait in the remaining ones. After that, I grabbed this ultimately useless weapon to progress the level, took out some filth, and spawned these guys in, only to perform an advanced wall bait. The next room was kind of chaotic, so I would always try to have red invints when grabbing this secret, because dude, the purple skull just makes life so much easier, like it's just so nice. Re-entering the staircase room, I encountered some more filth. Be careful here though, because they kind of jump at unpredictable times, and yeah, it's a little dangerous, so just wait for that and then attack when you feel it's safe. A couple of soldiers are also supposed to spawn, but you can skip the trigger by using a precisely timed ramp boost and getting up to the next level like I did here. Cerberus was a piece of cake, obviously, but the rest of the level is kind of sketchy without having purple invints. It all depends on this last secret. If you have red invints before grabbing it, great, you can just do what I did here. But if you don't, it will look a bit more like this. A little scary, but if you stay cool, you'll get through it. Alright, now it's time for 5-4. Yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah. This is where the fun begins. Heresy itself isn't very long, it's another 2-level layer like Gluttony, but 6-1 is another huge choking point. It's got no time to waste, throwing you right into the thick of it, so I'm gonna do the same and get right into the strategy. The first room of 6-1 is probably the scariest first room yet, featuring these lovely 3. My first target was the swords machine, because ground targets are always easier, but the Maurices were definitely going to get shots off before I could get to them.
This should make you feel better.
At first I thought that would make this room terrible, because there's nowhere to hide. But that is not true. These chains actually break line of sight if you hide behind them, so I used that to wallbait the second Maurice. Also, don't let this expressionless face fool you. I was fucking terrified that whole time and was super relieved to have gotten through it. But moving on, the 2 hidden filth in this hallway were next. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're filth, so they're easy if you know when to expect them. But if they catch you off guard...
Oh no!
The room that follows this hallway, though... If I could rate this room on a scale of calm to get me the fuck out of here, I'd probably rate it right about here. The amount of enemies that spawn is absurd. But I actually came up with a very consistent strategy somehow, and almost never died here. Firstly, there are 2, what I'll call, hotspots that I use to wallbait a majority of the enemies. The first one is here, behind this pillar. Soldiers really like to get up close and personal, so I punish that weakness. The hotspot didn't work for the filth, sadly, but they weren't really a problem anyway. It works out though, because when I killed the last one, I needed to be standing close to where the swords machine would spawn, which is about where I'm currently standing. The rest of the second wave enemies were all strays and schisms, and actually, pro tip, red projectiles can't hit you like 99% of the time when you're sliding. Unless you're really close to the enemy that's shooting you, it's really hard for them to target you correctly. So, I took out a few of them, then just slid all the way to the other side of the room, where I could walk up the stairs and set up at the second hotspot. Unlike the first hotspot, this one had an unbreakable pillar, so I used that to wallbait the rest of the enemies. Like I said, the strategy is consistent, but don't underestimate the power of stress. And by that I mean, I made this look easy. The bridge room after was a lot easier in comparison. All I needed to do was take out the Maurice and Sentry before they could really do anything, and the rest is self-explanatory. Don't get too comfortable with your movement though, because it is pretty easy to fall off. I did fall intentionally, but it was to get this secret down here, which you can actually get back up from thanks to this tiny little ramp. While in the hallways, I grabbed this secret here to get red invints, which will be crucial later in the level. Once I reached the outdoor section, I ran to just before the enemy spawn trigger here, and then I got the best ramp boost I could to skip spawning the enemies. Not just on this platform, but all of these as well. If your ramp boost is good enough, you can land right at the door to the final room. The final room is very chaotic, and it's easy to get overwhelmed if you kill one of these guys early. So, I would always just come over here, wait for them to shoot their yellow mortars, then jump above where the mortar's impact site is, and use the boost it gave me to reach this secret. Little bit of explanation. Explosions don't kill you if you're completely above them. I haven't needed to use that mechanic until now, but there you go. Now you know. Once I had the purple skull, I raced to kill both hideous masses and then everything else as quickly as possible. I didn't have a route for this room, so I probably could have killed everything before the purple skull went away, but I was able to come out on top regardless. Out of both Heresy and Violence, 6-2 is probably the only level that doesn't make you want to cry. There's even a convenient bounce pad that takes you right to the fight. From there, you just give Gabe 2 a good ol' smackin'. But before you do that, you might want to chill in the lobby a bit. And I don't really think I need to explain why. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are. The final stretch. This layer is so intimidating that it makes everything before it feel like nothing more than a small piece of the puzzle. Like all those levels were just the beginning. By itself, violence may not actually be as hard as I've made it out to be, but when you've come this far, even having conquered everything up to the point at which I stand, the end has never felt so far away. One wrong move, and you lose it all, resetting to the very beginning. Until now, I haven't really discussed the enemies added with each layer because they haven't had a huge impact, but these guys, they're not fucking around. The mannequins are so insanely fast that even in Clash mode, the mode where you one-shot everything, they are very likely going to get a hit off on you. The Guttermen, on the other hand, while not as fast, will fuck you up at long range thanks to the fact that they literally never stop shooting. And finally, the Gutter Tanks are sure to 360 no-scope you if you're not paying attention. Like seriously, the lead on their attacks is unreal. To have all three of these guys added just before the end is a real pain in the ass. Now you'd think the start of the layer wouldn't be that intimidating, but that is not the case with 7-1. This level is harder than any before it, only getting beat out by 7-3 and 7-4. You know, only 2 of the 3 levels I have left. Most of the difficulty in 7-1, though, comes from the larger level style, making secrets more spread out and therefore less effective against the greater quantity and quality of enemies. To start the level off, there's a fun little introduction to the layer's maze-like nature, and also mannequins. Thankfully, there's a secret I could grab before the first enemy encounter, which happens in the room with the red pedestal. The mannequins here will ambush you before you can place the skull key, but I always cheesed it by jumping into the door, which would usually make them clump together and allow me to kill all 6 at the same time. Just downstairs from there was the next encounter. There were only 4 mannequins this time, but that's still more than enough for something to go wrong. The most consistent strategy I found was to hug the entrance while jumping down to the stairs. The mannequins would usually come right up to me so I could just go side to side killing them. In the next room, I could skip spawning the enemies until the very top of the stairs, where I could then kill the Virtue, go outside the room, and wallbait the remaining mannequins. For some reason they can't go through the door, so that made things easier. Annoyingly, I took damage, but it wasn't the end of the world. After grabbing the blue skull, I headed to where the Minotaur breaks in, and then followed it closely so it'd kill the Maurice before disappearing. Immediately after, I went to grab this secret for extra protection, and it's a good thing I did because the mannequins struck me once again. After that, I hid under the edge of the top floor so the Cerberus could fall down, and then moved on. Since I didn't have any secrets, I went out to this hidden area and grabbed a new one. I would need purple invince to confidently approach the next big room, but first I grabbed the blue skull again so I could minimize my downtime with purple invincibility. This red secret up here was the last obtainable one in the level, so I had to be super careful. Normally I would try to have at least red when encountering the Minotaur, but I took one too many hits and had to settle for blue. There's a reason you should aim to have red invince for this last section though. As you may know, it's a tram battle, and the tracks damage you if you touch them. Not a huge problem by itself, but the Minotaur has a very strange hitbox in Clash mode, and it's almost guaranteed that you're going to hit the tracks while attacking him. That's why I was so visibly relieved when I ended the fight, because without invincibility I was almost certainly dead there. The level wasn't over yet though, because our guy makes a surprise entrance as the level baits us into thinking we've won. This entrance attack he does is really dangerous without proper timing, so just practice this until you've got it down. Don't try to wing it, please. Trust me, dying with the exit to the level right in front of you is not the greatest feeling. I got robbed. If you survive the surprise attack, well then lucky you. It's time for a little break with 7-2. This level is by far the easiest of all the levels in Violence. I mean, its challenge is literally to beat it without killing anything. I still wanted to be safe though, so I had a plan for the whole thing. By now, you should know the drill for the start of a new level. Find a secret first, and then do the level. Luckily, there's one right out in the open. To get over there without triggering any spawns, I would always use this hill over here to ramp boost. This secret does come with a surprise encounter, but just don't get hit, lol. Once that was over with, I went to the secret hole in the ground and hitched a ride on the tram. You can actually skip the part where you fight the Gutterman entirely if you jump off the tram just before entering this area, like I did. Getting the red skull is also very easy. You don't even have to do the trick where you break the top of this cage open, you can literally just grab the skull through the cage. Now, if you've really been paying attention, you might have noticed me doing this in earlier levels too. Even better still, the Whiplash isn't usable in Clash mode, so this whole section leading up to the nuke room is skippable thanks to the devs. With the nuke acquired, all that was left to do was bring back the tram to where it started. And don't worry about these guys, if you hide in this corner they can't seem to get you. But finally, this last room has a secret path that lets you avoid spawning any enemies, so I took that path and left without a scratch. Just in case the footage was hard to follow, here are all the turns you need to take in order, starting from the entrance to the room. 2 down, 2 to go. 7-3 is an interesting case. It has a secret exit, but not one that's easy to get to. You gotta lead a couple of street cleaners to this door at the beginning, and then have them burn through the leaves. But to get them there, first you'd have to beat most of the level to unlock the necessary gates. So I figured that wasn't worth it, and came up with a different plan. As you know if you've played 7-3, there are these strange trees that you have to feed with blood for them to look like this, and then once you've gotten all 3 of them, this big door will open allowing you to access the final room. It's easy to skip around in 7-3 thanks to how open it is, so after the first feeding, I hopped around to grab a couple of secrets. The first one was up and to the left on top of this roof over here, and then the next one I ramp boosted off of this little thing to fall into this red secret, and then I used the Hideous Masses mortars to boost me back over the fence, because you can't jump over it, and then I used the purple invince to kill everything in sight. Once that was done, I headed through this gate right here to get to the second tree. The goal with getting the purple skull early was to kill the bigger enemies in this second tree room, but my power ran out just before I got to the first Maurice. No biggie though, I made it out unharmed. With only 1 tree remaining, I headed to the left side of the map and watched a gang war. Bit of advice, kill the Maurice here while it's distracted. Also, be careful when you actually get to the tree room because the soldiers do not give a single shit about infighting. Those motherfuckers are coming straight for you. Funny enough though, they can't get through this gate by themselves, so I, of course, used it to wallbait them. The mannequins are also able to lock onto you here, but unlike with the soldiers, it doesn't seem to be guaranteed that they will, so just keep an eye out for that. Now, depending on how good your RNG is, the tree may or may not be fed by the time the infighting is over. If you're super lucky, it will be. But I wouldn't rely on that. I waited until just the Mind Flayer and the Gutter Tank were left so I could kill some of the Blood Strays while they were distracted with each other. It looks easy enough to pull this off, but my god, there are so many ways this room can go wrong. With all the trees fed though, I headed back to the middle for the last section. But before entering, I went under the bridge to grab one last secret for Purple Invince. Historically, I've had so many issues with this damn room. From taking damage out of nowhere to somehow managing to die after killing everything. It's been rough. And in this run, I had it no better. You'd think I would have learned to not pick up power-ups while flashing by this point because of that bug, but you'd be dead wrong. It's actually astonishing how much of a repeat this run was of the run where I got robbed. Just like that one, I grabbed the dual wield while flashing, lost it almost instantly, and then proceeded to get the same random damage bug in the exact same spot. Like, how does this even happen? Despite everything, though, I did it. I had finally gotten myself another chance to finish this thing. Once and for all. No deaths, no checkpoints, and no turning back. The challenge is simple. Get in and get out. I can't do this level justice with words, and I think I've talked enough, so I'll just let you watch this one. And there you have it. The full game, played entirely in Clash mode, and with no deaths. You have no idea how good it felt to finally beat this. And you may think this is just a silly mode in a silly game, but after all the hours and hours of effort that I put into beating it, it definitely turned into a lot more than that. This shit was hard. And if you ever decide to take on this challenge yourself, you'll understand. I'll most likely have the rule set for this posted in my Discord by the time this video goes up, but yeah, this challenge was actually suggested to me by someone in my Discord. I did already want to do a Clash mode run of some kind, but this post is kind of what kicked it into high gear. And it was honestly pretty fun to go through the game and figure out how to beat everything, so if you want a really hard challenge, I'd recommend trying it. Although, I do have a few tips for you first, and these are all things I discovered in my time playing. Couple of basic things first. You can't wall jump, it's disabled in this mode, and the UI does not work. You can't see how much stamina you have, at least at the time of recording. Now the next two things I've already talked about a little bit, but I'm gonna go over them again just to have all these tips in one place. Some projectiles can't hit you while you're sliding. Talked about this in 6.1, although there's one thing I'd like to add. If you need to turn for any reason, point your camera in the direction that you want to go first before releasing the slide, and then once you release, dash in that direction and immediately start sliding again. In a bullet hell room like the one in 6.1, this will keep you alive 9 times out of 10. The other thing we talked about in that level was the fact that explosions give you an upwards boost instead of killing you if you're above them. It has to be like as the explosion happens though. If you fall into an explosion, you'll die. So just be careful out there. Finally, these next few things I haven't really discussed at all, so here they are. If a wall is thin enough, you can pick up skull keys, break idols, and kill enemies through it. Now this actually would have been relevant had I done P2, but that level is insanely difficult. It's probably possible, but it doesn't have any secrets, and the margin of error is like so small it might as well be 0. And that's why P1 isn't required, because, you know, parity between levels. And that's about all I have to say about the Prime Sanctums. Hell, you can try P2 if you want, but you'll quickly see why I didn't talk about it in this video at all. Anyways, back to the tips. If there's an inclined surface on a wall, you can actually ride it if you do a dive. If the wall starts from the ground with an incline, then sliding into it works just the same. We've talked a lot about secrets and invincibility, but one thing I haven't mentioned is that when you have purple, you can pick up pedestal items automatically. You don't even have to spin. Speaking of spinning, if you do a dash and then spin immediately after, you'll keep the momentum of the dash instead of slowing down like you usually do. This is probably the most used mechanic on this tips list because I was doing it 24/7 to get around the levels. And finally, one last thing. We've already talked about this, but I can't stress it enough. If you have just been hit, meaning your player model is flashing, and you're going for a power-up that will give you purple invincibility, wait until you stop flashing. Don't pick it up during that period. Otherwise, if an enemy hits you, you'll lose the purple skull prematurely. Now, let's talk about how to beat 5-1 in bounds. Originally, this is how I planned to beat 5-1, but when I stumbled across that Out of Bounds clip, I couldn't help but give in to the dark side. However, when I revisit this challenge on Ultrakill's full release, I will be using the strategies I'm about to discuss. First and foremost, don't drain the water. You're gonna need it. Second, don't take this green gateway. If you do, you'll skip a much needed secret. To get past it, all you have to do is ramp boost on the incline right in front of it, like so. Normally the next bit would be impossible, but if you do another well-timed ramp boost on the side of this thing, you can get to the top of this tunnel very easily. Once up there, go down and grab this secret. To get across the gap from there, you'll need to do a dive against the wall and hold that dive to perform a wall ride. This part can be a little tricky, so make sure you're actually diving onto an inclined part of the wall, otherwise you'll fall. The big middle room is next. I'd recommend going for this strafe first. If you're good, you can get collateral on the one further back, but even if you don't, forget about it and kill the Virtue second because that bitch is annoying. The other enemies aren't going to hesitate to attack you though, so you'll probably want to go over here like me to hide from them. If the drones manage to survive the soldiers' bullets, you can use this little area to kind of 1v1 them. After that, just play carefully around these pillars, getting as close to the soldiers as possible so they don't have time to shoot you. I messed it up here, but do as I say, not as I do. Now, The first skull key room you'll want to do is the left one. It is the hardest, but it's better to get it out of the way early while you still have access to secrets. Before entering the room though, you're going to want at least blue invince. Reason being, there's a red secret up here that you can use to get purple invince. If you get hit and lose the original secret before this, you can grab this one where we 1v1'd the drones. But if you didn't get hit, I wouldn't recommend grabbing this one because it'll be way more useful later. Now you might be wondering how the hell you're supposed to get up here, but don't worry, there is a way. Once you trigger the start of the room, a virtue will spawn over here. Virtues are very bouncy, and we can take advantage of that bounciness by spin dashing across the water to land perfectly on top of it. You'll need to hold jump when bouncing on it though, because if you don't hold jump, the boost won't be enough to reach this platform. Once up there, just deal with the surprise encounters as quickly as possible, and then jump back down to the entrance door side. It can be a little tricky to not get bounced back up by the strays, so just keep moving until you can go for the virtue. After you take it out, go underneath to where the Maurice is, and kill it. This next part is pretty cool. You see those soldiers in the middle area? They're going to give you a lot of trouble if you try to go for them directly. However, there is a malicious face on the other side that you can bait into taking them out. It will not hesitate to fire even if the soldiers are in the way, so all you have to do is lead it to one side and then show your face. Once that's done, you can just do whatever to take out what's left. Just be careful. If you get hit like I did, this is where that secret from earlier comes in handy. Use it to get back to red invince, then enter the second middle room. There's another secret under the rocks here that you can use to once again get purple invince and mow through all the enemies. I actually picked up the skull key early through the cage, but I didn't realize it until I had already gone all the way back up there to get it. Kinda funny. But the last room is really easy even if you don't have a secret. Just take out the Maurice first and then dance around the Cerberus. Then finally, with all 3 skulls now acquired, you can go through this big door and take the secret exit. It wouldn't actually be that hard to finish the level normally, but it's like, why risk it, you know? Anyway, that's about it for this challenge. I still have a bunch of plushies on sale, so if you didn't get one the first time around, they're still there. Any purchases are greatly appreciated. Thanks to all my supporters over on the Discord, especially to the new guys, Jack on the Box and UBM Unique, and thank you so much for watching this far into the video. I know I don't upload a lot, but I really do try. Nonetheless, it's been fun, and I hope I'll see you again when I return.